Hello and welcome everyone to the panel discussion Collecting Entanglements. This is the first public program of Collecting Entanglements and Embodied Histories. My name is Maya. I'm the project manager at Goethe-Institut Indonesia, who will give a brief introduction about the project background and today. Collecting Entanglements and Embodied Histories is a curatorial collaboration that began with looking at the collections of Galeri Nasional Indonesia in Jakarta, MAIIAM Contemporary Art Museum in Chiang Mai, Nationalgalerie Berlin in Germany, and Singapore Art Museum. It is an initiative of Goethe-Institut in Southeast Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. The process of discussion and exchange since 4 years ago, it's quite a long preparations, culminates in 4 related exhibitions presenting works from this collection and other artworks. Relating to each other, the 4 different exhibitions are created by Anna-Catharina Gebbers, Samboh, Gaweewong, and June Yap, who will also be our moderators today. The exhibition should be presented in 2020 and 2021, but due to the COVID-19 crisis, the exhibitions are postponed to this year and also next year. A series of online public program is to be conducted in conjunction with each venue exhibitions every Thursday in last month, 5 p.m. Bangkok, Jakarta, and 6 p.m. Singapore. So our opening program features 3 Goethe-Institut regional directors, which are Stefan Dreyer, the current regional director of Goethe-Institut Southeast Asia, Australia, and New Zealand region. And we also have Heinrich Bluemeke, who held the same position between 2013 to 2019. And there's also Franz Xaver Augustin, the regional director from 2007 to 2013, and whose birthday is today. So thank you, Susie, for the information. I would like to also introduce our moderators today. Anna-Catharina Gebbers, usually called Katharina, is the curator at Nationalgalerie Berlin, responsible for international media and performance art. And Gridthiya Gaweewong, aka Yap, currently works as artistic director at Jim Thompson Art Center, Bangkok, and is a guest curator of MAIIAM Contemporary Art Museum, Chiang Mai. June Yap, or usually called June, serves as Director of Curatorial Collections and Programs at the Singapore Art Museum. And lastly, Grace Samboh, an independent curator, part of Hypen, a Yogyakarta-based group who's doing research, archiving, editorial, and many others, part of Jakarta Biennale curatorial team, and program director of Rubana Underground Hout. So without further delay, I would like to pass this to my fellow moderators and encourage you to drop your questions, comments, and thoughts, or just say hi in the chat columns. My colleague will pass this to us. So enjoy the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and guten Tag. I'm really happy to be here and to be with my colleagues and 3 regional directors of the Goethe-Institut regional office in Asia and Pacific. I would like to start the questions, for Heinrich, because since the project, it was really, taking more than 2 or 3 years, to prepare, and it took like at least 2 regional directors, to kind of conceive this project. Heinrich, what was the what motivated you to start this project? And originally, it's the ideas of dealing with the ghosts in Southeast Asia. And what's the urgency, to initiate this institutional collaboration among the region and to connect with Berlin?
Thank you. Well, many questions, more than one question there. I think seeing when I came in, or I came back to Southeast Asia, where I had been between 1996 and 2002 in Singapore, what I witnessed that even outside of Singapore, there were new public museums established, private museums. So there was some movement in the Southeast Asian museum scene. I'm sure we will touch on this diversity of the cultural landscape and the museum landscape between, let's say, Singapore, the Philippines, or countries like Cambodia, Vietnam, or others. There were, and you are representing one of those private initiatives in Thailand, especially in Chiang Mai, in Jakarta, with Machan, which opened during basically the preparation of the project. There were the foundation or the re-establishment of art biennales, not only in Singapore, in Jogja, in Jakarta, in Kuala Lumpur, and then in Bangkok also. So that was part of the context, and also a certain hype, at least momentarily, in what I would say in the art market. Hong Kong, Singapore, in artists from Southeast Asia, in artists from Philippines, and then from Indonesia, from Thailand, and so on. So that was basically the perspective of the Southeast Asian scene. On the other hand, we had in Germany a larger reflection on museum, on the institution of the museum. There were efforts somehow to question, so to speak, the canon, which was very much Western-based, the Western modernity, where the non-Western areas were somehow, not only somehow, were largely missing, especially the German museums. Basically, I could not, in 2013, I would not venture to mention, apart from the ethnographic museums, that any major German museum of contemporary or even modern art had anybody in charge of, so to speak, Southeast Asian art scene. That was basically the point of departure, but there was a certain openness. At least one could feel that inside the German scene, this was questioned somehow without having any solutions, without any perspective of a major change. Basically, naturally, out of this, the common ground between museum people from the Western countries and the Southeast Asian countries, which were and are, at least in my perspective, very diverse, there was very little ground. Then the institutional museums in Southeast Asia were mainly national museums, so to speak, focused on national heritage, not really on contemporary art practices. So what could be somehow done for a cooperation between museum institutions as diverse on both sides? We started then to work with young curators. We wanted to shift away from a model where we bring in Western curators, be it from Germany or whether other Westerners based in Singapore, having a certain expertise, which is unquestionable and was unquestionably all the time. We wanted to work with young people from the region. One of the steps was send somebody on a fact-finding mission, so to speak, explore Clementine de Lis, visit on a research trip all the institutions, identify actors, interested and interesting people, identify also issues which could be of common interest. That was basically, and that led then to some workshops in Phnom Penh, in Kuala Lumpur, in Singapore, and in Jakarta, where we brought together interested and interesting people from both sides. Mainly, I mean, people from the German Museum, open to questioning basically the role of the institution, questioning the Western canon, and having a genuine interest in a cooperation going beyond, so to speak, their normal business. As one, then I think Clementine de Lis made the bridge to an initiative which was totally independent, started here in Berlin, and Katharina is representing of that. That was Hello World, where they, so to speak, identified inside, since Clementine de Lis was, so to speak, involved also in that project and also in the coordinating the workshops or the roundtables. We didn't call it workshops, we call it roundtable. That was basically the point of departure, where then Katharina Gebbers came in and the process started. So basically the dream, and actually it was a dream, it was also among our colleagues heavily questioned whether it was a realizable dream, that somehow a museum from a country as, well, heavily structured Germany and as diverse museum landscape in Southeast Asia, with very diverse interests, with very diverse, so to speak, philosophy, context, institutional constraints would ever be possible. And therefore, I'm delighted to see it. I mean, naturally, there's not the whole Southeast Asia. I never dreamt about that. But at least that something would come out of this effort. So I'm delighted that it, at least on a small ground, is possible.
Yeah, it's almost like a mission impossible, right? Okay.
Maybe, I don't want to talk too long.
Yeah.
Does it answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yes, and I would like to jump in and say that it really needed some time to get this together. So I think Heinrich approached me in early 2017, where we met, and we started with our first discussions how we could, in a way, jump into this adventure. And at the same time, I was, as Heinrich mentioned, preparing a chapter of Hello World, and I was anyhow traveling to Indonesia, and I met the first people who were later on also involved into this project. And I just wanted to mention that it is great that we had so much time to work on this. And then Stefan took over. I can't remember which year. Was it 2018 or 19?
19.
Stefan?
Yeah, my mic was out. No, it was actually 19. But I think we met in 18. Because we met in Berlin, yeah, and Heinrich introduced us. Yeah.
And you already organized this project called Discordant Harmony. So you were, in a way, experienced in this, in structuring a multi-institutional project, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was, I mean, it was striking because Heinrich introduced us, I guess it was somewhere in maybe October or something in Berlin. And you were mentioning the conference, which then took place in June already. And it was very interesting to see that there are four institutions, because I worked in Seoul for 6 years from 2010 to 2016. And during that time was pretty heavily involved in a very comparable project, also between 4 curators from Korea, Sunchum Kim, whom you all know, I guess, from Art Sonje and from different places and biennials and so on. Yuki Kamiya, who is now in New York, and at that time was the Hiroshima City Museum of Contemporary Art. Chen Huang and he a freelance curator from Taipei, who was connected to the Kuanda Museum of Fine Arts in Taipei, and Carol Liu, at that time also freelancing, but then later on going to Inside Out Museum in Beijing. And we had, and it was also over quite a number of years, we had initiated actually a dialogue, a bit in a different way, thematically, because we introduced this notion of of harmony, which is attributed in a Western perspective easily to Asia. It's also an aesthetic principle in music and so on. You can associate ecology and the relationship between mankind and nature. But it was also at that time a slogan of the Communist Party in China. So we thought there is quite a horizon to initiate a dialogue, looking at the possibility to then translate it in some kind of exhibition. And of course, as a German cultural institute, and this is, I think, an interesting question, we also invited a German curator, that time Stefan Berg, Kunstmuseum Bonn. And we had very fruitful first meetings in reflecting this notion and talking about possibilities. But at a very early stage, it became rather clear that there was a very fruitful discussion going on between the 4 curators from East Asia. But it was a bit difficult to construct a relevance for the Kunstmuseum Bonn, which then led to our mutual decision to say, and Stefan Berg was, very open there also, to continue the conversation between the 4 curators from Taipei, China, Japan, and Korea, and to go on with the project. And since and this is also, I think, a parallel, since they were connected to respective institutions, then we developed this idea about 4 different exhibitions in the different cities. At the very first years, it was practically difficult to imagine this for mainland China, because obviously this terminus and the discussion was also politically loaded, which of course made it very interesting also for the curators to continue the project. And it then it got the title Discordant Harmony, and the subtitle, A Critical Reflection on the Imagination of Asia, because again, in this type of conversation, you easily touch on the notion of the region and what does it mean and where does it come from and who prescribes it and so on, which also somehow, I guess, relates to the project we are talking about now. Now, as I think in the same way Heinrich mentioned, there was also an internal debate in the Goethe-Institut about what we are doing there, setting up a platform, a conversation, a project, a process between Asian curators, and having no real connection to Germany, no German curator, no German museum, no German artists. So why are we doing this? I think at the same time, it became also in those conversations, it became pretty clear and obvious that the Goethe-Institut played a significant role in this conversation in providing a platform, sometimes also acting as a sort of a neutral broker. We had certain political difficulties. We had some censorship issues. Because there is the history of those countries in the 20th century which played a role. And so when then I was introduced to Embodied Histories, as it was called then, I think I easily could relate to these prior experiences. And I could also, and this is still true, relate in a specific way that I think projects like this, which are difficult to maintain over time, over years as an institutional cooperation, they have to be driven by individuals. Yeah? And I think that was an experience we made in East Asia. And as I see it, it's very much the same experience here, that this possibility to make the impossible possible has a lot to do with the commitment of the 4 curators and your connection to the institutions. And I think so there are 2 layers. Yeah? There is obvious and the institutional cooperation, which is extremely interesting. And in this case, there is Germany involved, and I'm extremely happy about this. But it's also a challenge to keep on track also for quite some years. Yeah, now this has been going on also for 4 years. Yeah, so maybe I'm also talking too long, but so this brought me in, and yeah, and it was I think a very good way to connect to your collaboration.
Okay. I think it's very good point that you, both of you kind of lay out the landscape, a cultural landscape of Southeast Asia art scene, in connection to Germany, since like even trace back to the 90s, up until lately. But actually, it's not true that for me, I start my career, in the contemporary art in Thailand and the region since the 90s. And I saw a lot of German artists, and influence, in contemporary art in Thailand, both experimental art as well as film. It is really important, the role of the Goethe in Bangkok. But, and I also did a lot of exhibitions and projects in Germany. For example, in Hackaway, in early 2000, I did a project with Ong Keng Seng. We curated the show for Hackaway entitled Politics of Fun, right? But speaking about the institutional and person-to-person relationship, I would like to go to Augustine's about more grassroots, or a kind of smaller institutions and artist-run space, around the specific cities that you've based, in Southeast Asia. For example, the first time that we met was in Hanoi. I was in the inaugural exhibitions that the Goethe-Institut asked Tran Leung to curate, right? That was one of the most exciting moments in Vietnamese art scene. And we also met again during around 2006, when I co-curated with Gridthiya Gaweewong, it's supposed to be the Saigon Biennale, and then we changed the project to Saigon Open City. And after that, you moved to Yangon, right, to start the first Goethe office in Myanmar. So I would like to ask you to kind of give us like your impressions, of all the art scene in these different cities, and how do you see it, like this change, and how was the landscape, and what is your impression, from then and now? Mute. Microphone.
Hello. Now it's working. Yeah. Sorry, I'm now a farmer on my land in Tuscany. I'm not used to this Zoom. All what happens around Corona is happening very far away from me. So I'm not used I'm not used to Zoom conferences and so on. I'm quite happy to produce my oil. I remember very well our exhibitions, our first meetings in Hanoi. The situation in Hanoi in the early 2000 years was still very much under the impression of governmental censorship. The Goethe-Institut, the new Goethe-Institut in Hanoi, had a small 150 square meter room for programs, and these 150 square meters were practically the only censorship-free space in Hanoi of that time. And the exhibitions we did there, I think, were very important for the young artists to have an opportunity, to have a platform, to have a showroom for their work. And I had the impression that this was quite important for the art scene. And if some of the young artists of that time became famous also on a world level, it was sometimes due to the fact that they started with our exhibitions there together with the French colleagues. Then we tried to bring together the artists from other parts of Southeast Asia. That was my focus, actually, to foster and to support a kind of creative exchange between the different countries, between Thailand, Indonesia, Cambodia, and Vietnam. We organized at that time this exhibition, Art Connections, where that was a regional project. The topic was hybridity. And at that time, artists from all the 7 or 8 countries where we had an institute were working together with artists from Germany. Every country had one artist from Germany and one local artist who were working together and reflecting this question and this topic of hybridity. Finally, the results of this endeavor were shown and displayed in not only in the different countries of the region, but also in Stuttgart at the gallery of IFA. Yeah, and at that time, my main focus was always were the local artists who at that time had even less opportunities to connect to the international art market and to the international art scene than now. That has developed surely over the years. Then I was I came to Jakarta. In Jakarta, I wasn't responsible exactly for the specific programs, but at that time we did. You might remember that was a quite legendary exhibition. We did something on a huge exhibition of Raden Saleh, which was also an important investment into the National Library, the International Gallery in Jakarta. It was the first time that a huge exhibition was presented there with a local, with the works of a famous, legendary local artist. And finally, between Hanoi and Jakarta, there was another major exhibition focusing on topics of the region, on local artists. That was Fluxus, the influx, the exhibition, the artworks about the rivers of the region, the Mekong, the Ayeyarwady and other rivers, organized by my colleague Almut Meyer, who is now in Hong Kong. That was another very interesting exchange, curated by curators from the different countries of the region, and Yola Lindsay from Singapore. These works were shown also in the different countries, in the different institutes of Southeast Asia, and focusing only on the works of local artists, of regional artists. And then, of course, I came to Myanmar. It was a new situation. The artist scene was not very well developed, but during my time with the opening of the country, the artists became more known in the region and on the international scene. And I think we contributed with our spaces and with our possibilities at the villa, which we renovated for the new Goethe-Institut. Initially, we could use it as an art space before the restoration took place, and that was something very important for the local scene. There too, we brought together artists from Thailand, from Vietnam, Indonesia, and Myanmar. That was over the years my main focus. Congratulations for this new project, for this institutional contact and this institutional cooperation between famous and important players in the region and in Germany. That is a new aspect. It was not my focus, but I'm looking and I'm admiring what is going on. I'm looking forward to, I hope to see some of the exhibitions you're planning. Thank you.
Thank you for all your explanations. It's interesting to think about Heinrich, who have been in the region before coming to Jakarta as the regional director, and also to hear the long journey of Xavier and different places that I guess all of us individually have met Xavier in the region as well as out of the region. I wonder if I can draw back a little bit from this project and ask what may be a boring question, but I think is important for us to sort of understand the landscape. Which regions have you all been in? And do you choose these places, or are the places chosen for you? What is the time frame of such position? Is the time frame decided by all of you individually, or is it decided by the Central Goethe-Institut? And yeah, how do you engage with all these different places, I guess? Can we first start with Xavier?
Yeah, thank you. I had the great privilege to be present in the region from 2001, 2002, up to my retirement in 2019. I was first in Vietnam. I could found the new center in Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City. Then I was the regional director from 7 to 14 in Jakarta, and then my last job was in Myanmar. In all the three cases, I had chosen the places. Asia was my passion from the beginning at the Goethe-Institut. I started my career in India, and after that it was clear I would love to continue and to focus on Asia. I also had the great luck that I could always choose the places I wanted to go. They were definitely my wish places, and I'm happy about that. I couldn't imagine to work in a place where I have absolutely no connection with ideal and cultural connection.
Heinrich, which were the places where you were at the Goethe-Institut?
I was in Southeast Asia, in Singapore for 6 years and in Jakarta for 6 years. Both places had been my choice. Apart from that, I had been 2 years in India, as regional director for South Asia. And I also had been only for a good year in Algeria, and 4 years in the US, which the last two places were not really my first or whatever choice, so to speak. Well, there was quite a few times in the central office, which were never my choice, if I may say so. And now I leave it to Stefan.
Well, my very first contact to any Goethe-Institut was in 1983, when I still was studying, and I was at that time, I applied for an internship at the Goethe-Institut Jakarta, which at that time was, you might remember, Jalan Matraman Raya 23, I think it was. Yeah, I even remember. And after that, I was sort of hooked. Yeah, I wanted to go to the Goethe-Institut and join, and I finished my studies and so on. And yeah, and then the very first thing, they sent me to Budapest when I was preparing to go to Accra in a certain institution, and I got a call, you have to go to Budapest, where I spent 6 years. Then I was director in Colombo, Sri Lanka. After that, head office, they called me. It was not by choice, but then I also was heading the cultural department for a while. And after that, again, as the colleagues, I went to India in 6 years in New Delhi as regional director. After that, to Seoul for another 6 years. Then 2.5 years back to head office for strategy department, and since 2019 I'm in Jakarta, and most of the places were by choice. Then actually not the very first one, but it was also a good decision. And yeah, because you ask how long do you stay? Usually, I think at least for me, it was rather more than 4 or 5 years. I think 3 places I was 6 years. But usually it's somewhere between 4 and 6 years, I guess, also for Xaver and Heinrich, which gives you time, yeah, also to learn and to understand and to connect and so on. And I think for the job we do, we need time. Yeah? So diplomats leave their postings after maximum of 3 years, which is too short, I guess. Yeah. So I think it's a good decision for a cultural institution to say rather stay a little longer.
There's a question that all of us have is, for us it's particularly interesting that there is a specific Goethe-Institut in the region as an entity, even as there are local Goethe-Institutes in Singapore, in Thailand, in Jakarta, etc. Why is it? And the second part is, so how would you address the regional today? Because it's so much question what it means, like how to avoid terms like nation, like state, like Southeast Asian. We all know the difficult history of this term, and also there are terms like Eurasia, Nusantara, Somia, and if they are helpful for your discussions. I don't know who of you would like to answer the question for the region, and maybe Heinrich. Why is that?
The term the region for the Goethe-Institut has a rich history and has actually brought with it a long, I would say, internal debate. And I would be wondering if that debate would have ended in the meantime. Originally, the Goethe-Institut, so to speak, for purely logistic, pragmatic reasons was organized in regions, which had not the pretension, so to speak, of building up culturally homogeneous regions or something like that. But then somehow in the early 2000, well, I think around 2000, the regional had some kind of coordination. Let's say we do an IFA exhibition which goes from Manila to Bangkok to Kuala Lumpur to Jakarta, and then Jakarta has, so to speak, the function of organizing this. But it was purely, so to speak, an administrative coordination. The regional head office at that time wasn't called like that, didn't have any funds. The regional director was not, so to speak, the superior of the institutes, the directors of the institutes in Manila, in Bangkok, which means he was really, so to speak, one of my bosses as regional director said, I'm the consent clown, which means I have to organize or try desperately to organize consensus. This changed actually under heavy public funding cuts in the Eichelplan in Germany around 2000, when the regions somehow became, so to speak, there were two things. The central office was decentralizing in the sense of giving some money to the regions. And in order to somehow to coordinate the spending of the money, the regional director, assisted by a regional team, so to speak, was put in charge of distributing the funds. Out of which then naturally, and I'm now talking about on purely an organizational level, there was some kind of hierarchy. There was naturally also some kind of power, if you want, to construction, so to speak, in how the region was organized internally, but also how the region was, so to speak, behaving externally. Katharina, if I had not been the regional director, I would have not been in a position to put my act where my mouth was, because in a certain way, I needed to talk to you on a certain level that you don't waste your time with me. The backing somehow I will manage, and I would manage this knowing that I could not dictate the distribution of funds, but I could heavily influence it, if I may put it this way. The rest is to other colleagues, how they did it. I don't want to go into too much of the details, but I think each and everybody of us has a way of going about it.
Maybe to add to that, if I may. No, I completely agree. It was at the very beginning, 20 years ago, for the Goethe-Institut, it was a purely administrative decision to sort of also in a management way change the reporting system. Before you had 160 institute directors reporting directly to the Secretary General, which somehow makes it difficult. And there was, or maybe, we had a discussion about that. And then there was the general idea, no, let's bring in this regional structure, which at a certain point of time also was then connected to sort of had a hierarchical aspect and a budgetary aspect. But it also helped, I think, to bring the funds and the responsibility closer to the places where things happen, and gave a possibility to work in connection with others. This is one point. This is always pushed by regional directors. Let's do regional programs. We put aside monies for regional programs. But it also brings the responsibility of sort of running the institutes closer to the ground. I think that's a very important aspect of what we do. But The question, of course, is how do you translate an administrative structure into cultural entities, or the kind of work we do? And I think this is an ongoing question. I remember that in the early 2000s, at that time I was in the central office responsible for the cultural programs on a global level. And I went to the first regional meeting, or the regional meeting in Southeast Asia. Peter Bumke was there at that time, so the predecessor of Xaver, I think. And there was a heated debate about among the colleagues saying, what can we do together, since we are sitting in Wellington, and we are sitting in Sydney, and we're sitting in Melbourne, and in Singapore, and in Bangkok, and in Jakarta, and on the Philippines. And I think Vietnam was not opened yet at that time. And I think one result of this heated internal debate, what can we do on a regional level, are projects like Art Connections. I think that was an early one, or Dance Connections, and so on. But I think this there is a need to keep this question in our conversations with externally and internally, and also to look at possibilities, not only to think of the regional, but also of the trans-regional. Yeah, and the regional structure Goethe-Institut does help to maybe also make a connection between, I don't know, Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. This could be interesting under certain aspects. So answering Katharina's question, I think it's necessary to keep a critical distance to this notion of the regional, which can be extremely fruitful. And I think it's also part of your conversations. Yeah. So, Xaver, I don't know if you want to join.
You were mentioning the supra-regional cooperation in Myanmar. I did a program on post-dictatorship situations with South Africa and Rwanda, and we were talking about the working on trauma, on dictatorship, and there was also one representative from Argentina. That is possible. It is more difficult. We don't have the institutional context, which is good that we have it in the regions. For the supra-regional cooperation, it is more complicated, but of course it is of great interest. For me, the heterogeneous characteristics of Southeast Asia was always a kind of a challenge, but also a chance. I think there are a lot of aspects connecting the different countries, despite all the religious, cultural, and political differences. But it was for me always interesting in these endeavors, in these projects, which brought different artists from Southeast Asia together, including Australia. For instance, in our Dance Connection network, it was interesting to see that these Australian artists, these Australian choreographers, were highly interested in getting more and more concrete involvement in the dance scene in Cambodia, in Indonesia, and Thailand, and so on. Something they never would have had without our support. And there, I think the heterogeneous format of Southeast Asia is also a great chance. Of course, on the other hand, it looks sometimes a bit artificial to bring together so different economically, politically, culturally different countries in one hub, in one context.
Hi.
If I may just add two more sentences, because I think there is, in our institutional practice as a national cultural institute, this regionalization, which started in the early 2000s, also helped to, how to put it, to transcend the classical bilateral horizon of cultural co-production, which is let's say, the typical way to do or to work in the field of foreign cultural policies. It's not nation branding, but it's exchange between the guest country or your host country in Germany. And this regionalization brought sort of an intrinsic motivation to think much more multilaterally than bilaterally, which I think for everything we do is quite helpful. I think there is always a relevance between a bilateral dialogue, but everybody makes the same experience. It can be much more interesting to set up a platform where colleagues from Thailand and the Philippines and Singapore and Jakarta have a possibility to talk, to travel, to exchange, to meet, than if you only connect to Germany. And I think this is very much the fabric of cultural cooperation and networks and platforms we're talking anyway about. And I think that helped very much also the Goethe-Institut institutionally to also to legitimize and to defend a multilateral cooperation and not only the bilateral, because the classical parliamentarian from Germany would say, where's the connection between the guest country and Germany? And I think that helps us to do projects and processes like this one.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask you another question, and my question is perhaps about time, especially given our rather long-term relationship we seem to be having here, us being in our 5th year now. So on the subject of roots, well, I was involved in the Phnom Penh Roundtable, in the transitioning museums, conversations, and in 2018, and in fact, Katharina, we met in 2017. I actually checked my notes. I have notes from back then. So in this first conversation, I think for us, the subject of time is quite important, and thinking about the beginnings of this project, right? We kind of want to set the foundations, the intentions of this project. But in my question, I kind of want to project us to the end. Right? So my next question, actually 2 questions, are, if you could say in summary or perhaps some specifics, what do you see as your legacy? And by legacy, I don't just mean a broader German agenda that's Goethe, but your legacies as directors. That's my first question. And the second question is, what would you say is the legacy of this project? And thus also its measure, or in the case of this project, well, and also in that sense, what is the measure of its success? What would you like us to achieve? Not to say that we might actually do it, we might fail, but what would you consider the success of what you have begun here? So maybe we could start with our youngest Goethe director, Stefan, and then move through to Heinrich and then Xavier.
Yeah, because I mean, they have their legacies already. I think I'm going to start with the project or the process. And you were asking when and how do we consider, to which end are we doing this? I think I would say it's definitely not, it should not end when the exhibitions have happened. Yeah. So my aspiration, especially with this project, but also with other projects I've done or have been involved in, and I also would say for the Goethe work overall, is to see if we can support sustainable cooperative structures through personal engagement. And I think this is always about the personal and the institutional. So I think I would say when it comes to which end, I would very much hope that those 4 exhibitions, when they take place or when they have taken place, will also, provide ground for an ongoing conversation between you and colleagues in your institutions, and will have proved, and that's the other thing, more on the institutional level, that institutional cooperation is possible even if the institutions come from, how to put it mildly, very different backgrounds in their professional practice, not to go any deeper. Because I think that was one of the main challenges also Heinrich mentioned at the very beginning, Xaver, I think, has experienced. And we know, I think all of us know how difficult this can be from time to time. It took us, 1.5 years now to make this MOU between 5 institutions. But no, it happened. And I think that is promising. Yeah, I'm absolutely looking forward to all the exhibitions. But to be very honest, I'm sort of much more looking at the process, and this has to do with time. Yeah, because I think a sustainable and long-lasting, trustful cooperation needs time, and as representatives of institutions, we have to give this time and provide this time and fight to be able to provide this time. Yeah, because there is a project logic, which is, do the project and it has a beginning and an end, and then it's done, and then the next one. That's sometimes you have to do it and it makes sense, but it's not, I think, what's the overall interesting thing. And maybe that also somehow plays into legacy. I was in another country, as I said, and somebody said there is a certain way of working also, which is hands-on, hands-off, which has to do with an active role one can take as representative of an institution. But I think it's also important to be able to step back and enable things, and maybe somewhere in that direction, but it's not time to think about legacy for me. Yeah, so, but Heinrich, maybe.
Gosh, June, you really mean the question, what is, so to speak, the legacy of having been Goethe director for 35 years? Is that really the question?
Yes, well, 35 years or specific to when you were here,
well, then let me put it very shortly with an anecdote. When I was the first time regional director in South Asia, I came from Singapore, 6 years in Singapore, and we had the task from our head office to somehow define our mission, to define goals, what we wanted to achieve in the next 3 or 4 years. And so we did in Delhi a workshop, and then all of a sudden an old colleague who had been in India for I don't know how many decades jumped out and screamed at me, "Go away with all this rubbish talk. the only thing we achieve, or if we achieve anything, is creating memories. Meaning, so to speak, leaving behind, so to speak, Xaver, his exhibitions in Hanoi. I haven't been there, but I have heard about them. You might have heard about Xavier Leroy in Singapore, something which I didn't do much, but I, so to speak, fought through somehow and faced this or that or that. That might be the region. Otherwise, and I don't want to be too long, legacy of that project. I'm happy to see you here after, I'm now away 2 years already. And I said earlier, I wanted to get institutions and not, so to speak, curators hired from the Goethe-Institut to work together. That was my dream. And somehow it seems to be on its way, on a good way. So I'm very much looking forward to the result, but I'm already very happy to see you today here. That is the legacy, if you want to, on a very simple, on a very simple level.
Thank you. We're glad that, you're pleased with, just today already. Yeah, this is sufficient. And maybe Xavier, if we could hear from you too. I think you need to unmute yourself. Sorry.
Sorry. Now you can hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. I just want to confirm that obviously this kind of exchange we are having today is a confirmation of this decade-long work of the Goethe-Institut in the region. I have the impression that what is going on now, these 4 exhibitions, the cooperation with Hamburger Bahnhof, with the German National Gallery, is a kind of higher step based on other projects we had before. There is definitely a kind of evolution, and I don't know if it's a great progress, but over the years there were some interesting successes and some interesting results, and if the memories of these results and of these successes are there, it's nice. For me, something quite, if you talk about legacy, in both cases in Hanoi and in Myanmar, I have tried to create an architectural space, a very concrete architectural space, a contribution to the cultural infrastructure of 2 cities like Hanoi, later also Saigon, and then Yangon, where the cultural infrastructure is precarious and where there are no or better spaces. You can't compare the situation in these 2 cities. Hanoi has improved a lot over the last 20 years, but when I went there in 2001, 2002, there were practically no places where local and international artists could meet and show and discuss and perform and so on. In that regard, the Goethe-Institut there in Hanoi was a contribution to that, and the same happened in Myanmar. What is going to happen with that institute in Myanmar now under these awful circumstances, we don't know. I'm a bit worried that my colleague, the successor, is already leaving, and the institute is more or less vacant. It's not so good in this situation. We already lost 1 institute in Yangon in 1962 after the first military putsch by Ne Win. The institute in Yangon was the first institute ever in Southeast Asia, and it lived only for 3-4 years, because then this putsch happened and our colleagues closed the place. I hope the same will not happen to that what we have now in Yangon. So much about legacy and the fragility of such legacies.
Thank you. And if I'm here on a strict moderating role, just to remind other people who are watching through various platforms like from YouTube or from Facebook, we are accepting questions from the chat or comment columns. And our colleague from the different regional Goethe-Institutes will be sending the questions to us, and we can address it directly. And now I'm going to hand it to Katharina with the next question.
Okay, because after listening to Xaver, who said that originally it was more a network between the different Goethe-Institutes in the region or worldwide, I would also like to ask, because from the very beginning on, I think the Goethe-Institut was like a registered association to bring German culture to the world after the Second World War and the Nazi regime. But I think it's also the other way around. How do you help Germans to understand the culture of other regions? I mean, we had several at Hamburg-Bahnhof, several exhibitions like an exhibition on Chinese art in the 2000s, or like Hello World, and it's always the same. The German art press doesn't understand international art, and I think this is only a symptom about how a lot of people in Germany are not really, I don't know, how should I say, educated in knowing something about culture in other regions of the world. How do you think about, or how are you conceiving programs that bring back, or which bring what the Goethe-Institut all over the world are experiencing to Germany? So this is my long question, sorry. Maybe Xaver, because you said maybe you start with this, answering this.
Yeah, this was also an ongoing, can you hear me? Yeah, ongoing discussion in the Goethe-Institut. It's also, of course, it's also a matter of funds. We had for a certain period, many years ago, we had an office in Berlin and also in München, which was focused on this, bringing back the results of our work to Germany. But that was then, for a certain period, there was a kind of stop to these activities. I think also Heinrich will know it better than me. I'm not so informed and familiar with these relations with the Foreign Office. At the moment, I have the impression there is more a kind of openness for this bringing back, and what you are doing now with this project is surely an initiative, an early initiative, or maybe one of the first initiatives to focus on this kind of connecting the different parts of the world where the Goethe-Institut is active and Germany. I think it is very important to do it. You need extra money for it, because usually to bring, especially if you want to bring exhibitions from countries far away in the world to Germany is quite expensive. But the other thing is, of course, also this kind of institutional contacts, which are very important. And in this regard, I can only confirm admire that what is going on now in this project. I remember that we brought back things like dance productions from dance connections from Southeast Asia to France, to Germany. In some cases, we were quite successful. We had a production from Cambodia, which got awarded the first prize in Zurich at the what is this summer dance festival. These are, and I could add other examples. That is something which is, of course, of great value to us, but as I told you, it needs institutional and economic funding support. The exhibition Art Connections at IFA was also a kind of example. Yeah, in general, I think it is a task of the Goethe-Institut to do it, to bring back the situation of and the cultural impulses from these countries. The farther away from Germany they are, the more important it is. But it needs time, and it needs focus, and it needs attention to it. Absolutely d'accord that this is an important intention for the Goethe-Institut.
May I add? Very quickly, I think there is also we can witness a change in the German discourse about this question of the two-way street, and we feel it institutionally. Yeah, so let's say 10, 15 years back, there was a very clear mandate for the Goethe-Institut to spend its resources abroad and not at home. And now there is even in the parliament and in the foreign office and so on, and in many places, there is a new interest in what an institution like the Goethe-Institut is doing abroad, and also in collecting memories and experiences to bring back to a German society which has changed also in its self-perception. Yeah, which has become much more of also a migrant or post-migrant society, and I think that correlates, yeah, to a new interest in experiences we can bring into, let's say, a public discourse. And to mention maybe two things, there is every 2 years there is a cultural symposium, a very big one in Weimar. The next one will be in June, I guess. And it has a topic. And it brings in intellectuals and speakers and artists from all over the world. It's a 3-day program, which is pretty popular. Another point, example one could mention, when the conflict in Syria started, our institute in Damascus was closed. And we the institution made a pop-up institute in Berlin, which was called Goethe-Institut Damascus in Exile. Yeah, so there are ways, yeah, to play this, but I think there is more to do, definitely. Yeah, Katharina.
Heinrich, do you want to contribute some?
Everything has been said. I mean, I could add that the original actually mission of the House of the Cultures of the World, the HKW, in Berlin in the 1990s, that was, so to speak, conceived, but it has now a history, and I don't think that they would consider themselves anymore, since already more than 20 years. At so to speak, a relay station for Goethe projects to be brought back to Berlin. This is history, and they have very much been going into international, so to speak, cooperations, which is naturally also affecting to a certain in a certain way the Goethe-Institut, because we all know what is the dance company of, let's say, somebody like Sascha Waltzer is not a single German passport holder. What a German ambassador in the 90s in Singapore brought up as an issue for him. But I said, well, that's the way it is, based in Berlin, funded by public money. So you see what it is, and that makes it naturally not very easy to play this bilateral, if it is like that. But we have gone, so to speak, away from this. And I think the Foreign Office in the last 10 years has come around. Before it was a real issue, but I think they have learned at least that. You had a interesting question about failures, but nobody, I don't want to bring it up.
We have Yap, I guess. Also, maybe I remind people in YouTube or Facebook to ask via chat or comment. Then we have a question. If not, we can keep talking. I guess we have lots of questions. Yap, please.
We can just keep asking the questions at the moment. But I would like to draw back to what Xavier spoke about, the supra-regional kind of project that I think it might be the next step, of the role that the Goethe can play as a facilitator for not only within the region, and Germany, but we can complicate it, and make it more interesting and complicated and complex and more expensive, by bringing everyone together around the world, either within different regions or in Germany. But I think for what you spoke about, like, how when you invite different countries, or transnational project and focusing on one issues, I think now it's not that difficult, because now I think we are all in the same situation, which is, we're facing the COVID, right? Not only mention the migration, but I think with this post-COVID situation, it's so easy, that everyone can relate it to each other. So how do you see this kind of the potential or the possibilities, of the role of the Goethe to play, in the future, in terms of, connecting trans-regional or supra-regional within or outside the region and Germany?
Yes, I
yes,
try to answer.
Yeah.
I still have the active part, at least for a couple of years. I mean, for COVID, Jap, I'm not yet sure. I think there are at least two experiences. One is we are all in the same boat, and the virus doesn't know borders. But I think there is also the experience that the world is not the same, and that opportunities differ, and the accessibility of vaccinations differ in different parts of the world. And I think we have also made the experience that during the pandemic, at least partly, there are new nationalisms, that solutions are sought on a national level. We have this debate in Germany, but you have it in basically every country. So these are conflicting notions. I think we have to keep on discussing this and reflecting and contemplating this. I'm not absolutely sure if it's it's going in the good direction. You mentioned, but I think it's a task for all of us to think about that and see, once we are in a post-COVID situation, what this pandemic has done to us all. The trans-regional, I think, is becoming more and more important. And I think for an institution like Goethe, who has certain has a network. This is very important for us because we can easily connect to our colleagues in different regions who are usually well connected to the cultural scenes. Then I think it's the question about making it relevant. Also, where does it make sense to work regionally? Where does it make sense to work locally? Where does it make sense to work trans-regionally? But I think we have the opportunities are there. So, and we have sometimes we call the instruments. They are there, and I think we all together should use them.
But Japan has naturally also to keep in mind, since resources are not going to be, so to speak, unlimited, and the skies will not be the limits to resources. Going, so to speak, globally and playing into that naturally also has as a risk that you become more elitist, that you, so to speak, cater to a smaller group of globally convertible discourses and practices, that you become elitist, that you lose somehow, that naturally you bring in criticism of populists. And also even the Goethe-Institut, we had, not in the visual arts, we had in the performance arts since a couple of years, there is a fund, I don't know, I guess it's still existing, for performing artists. And they were, so to speak, supposed to put in a proposal. And we had a workshop with a performing artist in Bangkok, people from Germany and from all over Southeast Asia. And there was an extremely embarrassing incident when a German artist, so to speak, questioned this funding of the Goethe-Institut and said, but the German artists, which means those based in Germany, are your natural stakeholders, and you waste your money on people from all over the world. I mean, although in such a well-funded, that is why I said for somebody from Laos or Cambodia, it was an obscene, naturally complaint or, so to speak, point brought up. But you have to keep this in mind. In the end, so to speak, you might even at the Goethe-Institut face these stupid questions. What are you doing for the German taxpayer? I guess this is extreme, but one should not talk about it too much, but one shouldn't not forget it totally as a point. So there are limits. But for me, more important is this question, do we, so to speak, create a globally acting, practicing cultural elite? What you have already in the area of discourse, you have to speak English, you have to be either at, I don't know, Goldsmiths College or at Harvard, and then you are, so to speak, internationally compatible, and you can appear in this Institute for Advanced Study and there, and at the HKW and the Wissenschaftskolleg, and you name it. Do we want to have the same in the visual arts, in the performing arts? Then you might have 100 or 150 people, and that's it for the whole world. And where's the local and where's the regional?
Parachuting curators.
This is a good timing to probably ask about something that Heinrich have brought up, which is in our chat box. I wanted to ask about, like, in line of what we were in our current situation, also having had to postpone the several exhibitions. Now, all of the exhibitions have been postponed, and this is going to be an even longer kind of conversation that we are continuing. And something that Stefan mentioned very early on in this conversation about the impossibilities of working across regions. Now we are working across regions, and this is going very slow, and seemingly we are all fine with it. But considering the current state, are we, I don't know, how are we getting ready for failures, I guess? Or failures doesn't necessarily mean that it's a dead end forever. It probably only means that it's a dead end for now, that maybe the exhibitions will never happen because vaccination is unclear in Indonesia, for example. And yeah, I mean, questions like that. The recent ones that we are facing are actually works arriving in Chiang Mai, but we have to postpone the exhibition again. And yeah, so I guess maybe that's my last question for today. How are we getting ready for that? Or are we getting ready for that? Do we even have, are we even thinking about that? Have that ever been thought about in previous programmings?
I think, I guess I'm trying to answer. No, I mean, we, at least when I joined the project, we didn't think about it because we didn't think about a pandemic. Didn't know that it was happening. No, I mean, failure, let's say, even if, which I don't believe, yeah, the exhibitions couldn't happen, I doubt I would speak of failure, yeah, because there is a certain process of cooperation which has been going on and which I think will also continue. No, I think, I mean, I can only speak about the institutional role Goethe-Institut, for instance, is to take in this. Right now, I think we still should be optimistic. We even hear in Indonesia also that our staff in Bandung has been vaccinated, has got the first shot already. So things are moving. Yeah, maybe there is a good. We have to, live with postponements for another couple of months. But I think we have reached a state. I hope that also your institutions will agree, because they are important. It's not only a project by the Goethe-Institut, but the institutions you're representing are heavily involved, also heavily involved in terms of funding. So I would be more optimistic, actually. If this whole thing doesn't stop, then we have to think anew. But at the moment, I would say we are in a much better situation than we have been, I don't know, a year ago. So be optimistic. Hey, don't.
It's not being not optimistic. I was starting to think about, is it taboo to speak about failures, or is it just something that we don't share with people? But we,
no, I think failures in the field we work anyway, in terms of cultural cooperation and risky projects, there is always a possibility of failures. And I think every single one of us in his or her professional practice has gone through failures. And I think we can always take something from them. But at this moment of time, I think one option, and this is what we're doing in this project, is to provide the time we need. Yeah, I think you can more easily fail if you don't take the time which might be necessary. And we had this process of delaying, and you could have said, "Wow, no, let's forget about it." And I'm extremely happy that we all agreed that we are going to take it forward. Yeah, and so I'm looking forward to the exhibitions coming very much. So June, first.
I just wanted to mention that us as curators, we thought from the very beginning that the discussion process is already central and crucial and is the project itself, and then the exhibitions are coming maybe. So for us, this was already the project from the very beginning on. Yeah.
Yes, June, please ask your question.
Yeah, okay, right. So, yeah, just wondering, Heinrich and Xavier, do you want to add anything to that earlier point on failure, or you're good at us, you know, where we are?
Well, I'm not in, am I on?
Yes.
So I'm not up to date in that sense. Actually, one of the reasons for failures in the Goethe-Institut is that continuity is not something which is self-evident. So it is not at all self-evident that Stefan Dreyer would have taken on this project and drag it on for so long. I'm actually the normal average Institutsleiter I have met. If he would have been generous, he would have looked at it 3 or 6 months, and then he would have used his, so to speak, funds or ideas and energies elsewhere and start a new project closer to his or her, so to speak. This is, in that sense, this is also in institutional, so to speak, strength and weaknesses. We change directors naturally just for that, because we don't want that the same melodies are played over and over again. But sometimes this can come, so to speak, in the meantime. No, I'm not wanting to doomsay and play anything. I could only use failures in regional cooperation outside of this project naturally contribute, and I'm sure Xaver also can do that, which has to do with the region and the differences, so to speak, the differences in the regions, the difficulties, the even language difficulties. Bring somebody from Laos into a regional project and expecting to be on eye level to people from the Philippines or from Singapore or Malaysia, only on the level of understanding English, not about understanding the curatorial concept the Singaporean or Filipino might have learned in Goldsmith College, and so on, and how you negotiate all this, and to what it leads, and to what it does not lead, and how modest you have to be with, or how generous you have to be to go on with all this. Xaver. Oh.
No, I don't have to. No, I think these exhibitions will. I agree with Katharina that the process itself is an end in itself, and if that ongoing discussion, if this discourse took place and you discovered new spaces, intellectual spaces and creative spaces, that is already a success. But I'm also sure that this pandemic will be over after some time, and then you will have your exhibitions, and I'm looking forward to see some of them.
Thank you.
Hoping that I will be able to travel, because to do my farm work here is a little bit, after some time, it's a bit boring.
Thank you. Well, maybe we can visit your farm.
Yes, please,
yeah.
most welcome.
Next meeting at your farm, please.
It continues even after, you know, the exhibitions. So I've been tasked to ask the last question here. And first, I want to express, you know, very much appreciation for your being here, but also our appreciation for the time and the space that has been afforded to us to bring this project together. And it's really through this time that's allowed us to develop it and for it to also find its shape, which we have since titled collectively, Collecting Entanglements and Embodied Histories. So our final question then to you is what you might read from this longer title of the project in general, Collecting Entanglements and Embodied Histories, what you might read from this in its scope or sensibilities. It definitely admits the complexities that has been mentioned already, not only of the region, but also the relationship between the regions. It has a certain open-endedness to it. Perhaps you might even say it's got a certain sense of continuity or even suggestiveness to it. So maybe if we might poll you for any final thoughts or comments to us or to our publics, even as we will in our next program. So this is a call to everyone out there. Our next program where we will explain a little more from the curatorial standpoint why we have titled it this way. But yes, for our very kind directors here who are with us today and so kindly sharing about what this whole project, this whole exercise means to yourselves and to Goethe in general. What do you think about this? Or maybe you just want to wish us luck as we attempt to realize this. Shall we start with Samboh?
Yeah, what you said is I can only wish you success and good luck and courage and optimism in following it up. And I'm sure out of this endeavor will grow other projects and other interesting
Thank
projects.
you. We all want to be farmers too. Henry.
Well, also, I wish you luck. As I said earlier, the pure fact that you are still together, keep the ball rolling. That originally, I think when I approached Katharina, we had an idea which now I somehow tell a secret. This ghost idea was naturally part of the regional discourse and of the regional politics, because the region had wanted to do something in a different context and so on, but never really managed to get it about. And then, so to speak, I used this and that's how it goes, I guess. And since I didn't want to be the curator myself, neither I wanted to hire somebody because I had so to speak, a different agenda. With it, I had to leave it in those people representing the institution and work it out, negotiate it, remodel it, reframe it. And if in the end nothing of the ghost is there, well, the ghosts are there forever. And I'm sure they will be sooner or later find or have already found, actually, as we all know, plenty of curators, and there will be more, and the Goethe-Institut might not be needed for that. So wish you luck. Keep the ball rolling.
Thank you.
Well, I also wish us luck, so because I very much consider myself as being also part of the project. So I'm looking forward to more conversations. I'm also looking forward on as a regional director to the involvement of our institutes in Bangkok and in Singapore, and of course Jakarta anyway. And I think you have very nicely sort of put it relating to the title again, because I think after having listened also to this nice conversation today, one very much can relate to this act of collecting and to the entanglements, which are somewhere going between all those places. So we have a good title, and we are going to have wonderful exhibitions thanks to you. And I'm also very much looking forward to put it on the ground finally, and to keep
And I would also like to thank you to Rangi, our hero who saved the day, Devi, Nabila, Wilton, Ryan from Goethe-Institut Indonesia, Orngai, Manase, and Maren from Goethe-Institut Thailand, Valerie, Sabine, Kaisin, Hansong from Goethe-Institut Singapore, Charlotte, Rosalia from Nationalgalerie Berlin, Andre, Celine, Tenghui, Joella from SAM, Rachel, and Chita. And thank you for all of you who's staying with us. See all of you again on next Thursday, 27th of May, with the Curator's Talk. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.